Okay, according to new data from the Labor Department, women are overtaking men on American payrolls. Last month, women held just over 50% of jobs, surpassing men by 109,000.
Experts say the development likely reflects the future of the American workplace. The last time there were more women than men on U.S. payrolls was in the mid-2010.
For more on this, let's bring in Courtenay Brown. She's a markets reporter at Axios, and she joins us now. Good to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So, Courtenay, we mentioned last time this happened was nearly a decade ago. Why are we seeing this now? What's been the impetus?
So the last time we saw this, industries that hired men most predominantly were like construction and manufacturing and mining. They were seeing disproportionate shedding of jobs. That happened in the aftermath of the recession. Now we're seeing something slightly similar because of the trade war. Industries like manufacturing and mining are seeing a little bit of a downturn, so they're hiring less people. So the reason that women have overtaken men this time is because hiring in industries like education and healthcare and retail, those are industries that are predominantly women, and those industries are seeing more success than the manufacturing side of our economy. And this is a really good thing because this is the future of the workforce. We are increasingly becoming a services-oriented economy. 2/3 of our economy comes from the services side versus 1/3 that comes from manufacturing.
See, when I saw this number, a part of me was celebrating. I was like, that's great. But then the other part of me was, we've done so many stories on how men and women do not make the same amount of money. And I wondered if what it reflected was an overall decrease in the income of workers in this country. What does this mean for the economy?
Well, I think this milestone is great, and you're right to celebrate, but it does come with a few caveats. One is this is only one of 2 surveys that the Labor Department does, and it doesn't include folks who are self-employed. It doesn't include farmers, and those are industries that are predominantly men oriented. And I think the other thing is, you're right, there is a huge wage gap between men and women. There's a survey that comes out every year that says like something it's going to take 250 years for that wage gap to close on a global level. And that number gets worse and worse every year. So while this is a great thing that women have overtaken men in payrolls, there are still a lot of problems.
Right, there's still a gap in the labor force participation between men and women. Why is that?
Yeah, there is still a big gap between So labor force participation is different than folks who actually have jobs. It includes folks who are looking for work too. So people who have jobs and people who are looking for work. There is a big gap between men and women, but insofar as that gap has closed, it's been women driving up the labor force participation rate. Men are increasingly dropping out of the labor force at a faster pace than women are because of the opioid crisis, retirement, things of that nature.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. So I have a question that's not a part of our list of questions. So I don't know if it's something you delved into. But the other thing that I think about when I think about women in the workforce is childcare, and I wonder how numbers like this could impact other areas of the way we live.
Yeah, I think that's a big reason why it is so important that more women are A, in the labor force, and B, employed. I mean, it forces employers to think about things like childcare and having family-friendly childcare policies. I mean, last month we saw the federal government announce a pretty interesting, family leave policy that they hadn't announced before, and that is by nature because more women are in the labor force. And the other thing is the unemployment rate is so low that these are policies that are going to entice people to take work with the federal government.
And before we go, Courtenay, we got 30 seconds, but as great as this news is, there is still a huge discrepancy in wages between men and women in this country. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. There is a big gap between how much women take home and how much men take home. And, the studies that have been done about closing that gap are pretty dire. They don't look good.
They're dire.
Yeah, right.
They don't look good because...
I think because the gap is so wide, it's just going to take time for the gap to close. But if there are more women working, I mean, that bodes well for closing that gap. It's just going to take some time to do so.
Really interesting stuff, Courtenay. Thank you so much.
Come back and talk to us about this.
Absolutely,
This is really
anytime.
interesting.